My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Mike and Robin Murto. It's July 5th, 2018. We're at the Nicholson Library at Linfield College. And we'll start you off with a nice, easy question, which is why wine, or in your case, why grapes?
Well, we bought our place in May of 91. It was 6.5 acres, bare ground. And driving up to our place, you go by Erath, and you were going, well, I guess this is the coming industry we were thinking.
Sure.
Well, and the property had been in farm deferral. And in order to avoid paying several years of back taxes, we had to do something with the ground, farm it in some way. So, as Mike said, you know, there were a big one right across the street, Erath, and we said, let's plant grapes. So we did.
What made you what made you want to be in Dundee in the first place? Why was that the location you wanted to be in?
I think she was the main instigator of moving out of the city. I had lived on a farm. I was a young man. I don't need to go read.
Well, I did want to live in the country. I wanted more space. I'm a gardener, and I wanted to have a big garden, and I wanted at least what I perceived as the peace and quiet of the country. So, and Mike was working in Newburgh, and we were living in Tigard in a neighborhood. It was a nice neighborhood, but it was a neighborhood. And so Dundee, we found this house on 6.5 acres. It was a really pretty house, and the property was very nice, so I nagged him until he decided to buy it.
It was a new house, no remodeling needed, so I was off the hook. We didn't have to worry about doing any more of that.
And I'll just speak for myself. I was not a wine drinker when we moved out there. I was a Scotch drinker. I still am a Scotch drinker. But it seemed logical that you would plant grapes. The ground was beautifully sloped, was perfect for a vineyard. So it was a no-brainer.
Sure. So you had a farming background. How did you learn about grapes?
My parents had beef and dairy.
Oh, okay.
Wanted nothing on four hooves.
How did you learn about growing grapes then?
Two neighbors, Jim Marsh and Dick Erath.
Pretty good people to learn from, I guess. Yeah.
They've been doing it for 10 or 12 years before we got there.
Sure. So what was the process like then what were the kind of the obstacles or challenges you weren't expecting as you put in grapes?
Probably when we started planting in 1992 was one of the driest years we had. Warmest, driest years. And it was very hard to plant several thousand plants and keep them alive. That was the major challenge.
That, and we ran out of friends really fast to help us plant.
Sure.
And we had no clue what we were doing. No clue whatsoever. We just said,
Put them in the ground.
put them in the ground, and we wound up losing a lot of plants that year because we both had full-time jobs, and it was hard to stay on top of it would have to be hand watering. We don't have irrigation.
Sure.
So we did have a tractor to help a little bit, but so we were totally naive about what we were getting ourselves into.
Did you just plant Pinot Noir to start with, or did you try a variety of things?
Pinot Noir.
Just Pinot Noir. And that was because a recommendation, or just because?
Yeah, the neighbors, I mean, that was going to be the grape. Fortunately, we didn't go out and plant 5 rows of this and 5 rows of that.
Sure.
And, you know, like they did previous to us. They pretty much led us in the right direction.
Tell me a little bit about the industry as you came into it. What was it like? How many people were in it? You know, how big did it seem?
Seemed very small. I think there were 70 wineries, 70, you know, it was, and I might be wrong there, I'm just guessing.
That was in the whole state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now there's, what, 10 times that many?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it was hard to find labor. There were not the labor contractors there are today. So, you know, we really, first of all, we didn't realize that we needed labor. But then once we did need it, it was pretty hard to find.
Sure, sure.
So I guess I would also add, right in the middle of all this planting, we planted in the spring of 1992, and right when we were in the middle of planting, then the adjoining 20 acres came up for sale. And that adjoining 20 acres had 8 acres of vines already planted on it. Vines that were planted in 1978 by Jim McDaniel. And so the man that owned it, who was named Bill Pirelli Minetti, he was he was born into the wine industry in California, and he wanted to sell the ground. And he came over and he said, "Are you guys interested in buying this property?" And we said, "Well, let us think about it." And so we thought about it. He had it listed with a realtor, and there were people in their cars driving up in the vineyard because it had a home site on it. And we said, "We don't want neighbors, so let's buy it." So we did. And we convinced Mike's cousin to go in with us as partners. It was the three of us.
That's how we started. And fortunately, we got all the equipment with the purchasing. I mean,
Sure.
I think we paid, what, $150,000 something. I mean, today's, if you said, you bought 20 acres of Dundee property for $150,000?
Yeah, it was.
And all the equipment?
Yeah.
But you know what, Mike, at that time, it
Well,
was
yeah, I know.
it was hard on our hearts because it was a lot of money.
Sure, sure.
After we had just bought a house that was 5 times, you know, what we had planned on ever spending. So, and we all had day jobs, and we had now instantly 8 acres of vines to take care of. And we had no idea what to do. And so we would call up Jim Marsh and say, "What should we be doing today, Jim?" And then we'd call Dickie Rath, and they'd tell us different things.
Depending on where you were at. I mean, you know, it's what they're doing, not what,
Yeah. So then we'd
it's all
go,
pretty close.
yeah, they were close, but so, and so that's how we got through that first year. And Rex Hill had a contract to buy our fruit, and we had a bumper crop that year, and we made money, and we went, "Hey, we're really onto something here."
This is too easy.
Yeah. Well, it went downhill from there quickly. But we worked our butts off, all three of us.
Sure.
Every weekend, we'd be out there doing spraying, and you'd have to spray on the weekends, and the weather didn't always cooperate, so then somebody'd have to take a day off work to get the vineyard sprayed.
Sure. You mentioned having a contract with Rex Hill. How did you go about finding people to buy your grapes?
Mainly calling, or we've sold to Rex Hill for a while, and then, you know, this may be want to do some editing here. I don't want to speak bad of them, but, you know, they ran into some financial troubles in the early 90s. So, you know, then we started looking for other people. And really, we got searched out. So I'll start now. One of the people to search us out at that time was Tory Moore, and they were just starting. Another one who was just starting was Belpont and Carlton and Raptor Ridge. And Robin worked with Scott and Annie at
Sequent.
So,
From Raptor Ridge.
so here were 3 wineries just starting out that we were selling our fruit to. The previous.
And Patty Green was the winemaker
Yeah.
at Tory Moore.
Oh, of course, right.
So we were in the first bottlings of Tory Moore, Raptor Ridge, Bergstrom.
Right. Even before Raptor Ridge was a bonded winery, He was an amateur winemaker, Scott was. And we both worked, well, all three of us, Annie, Scott, and me, all worked at Sequent Computer Systems. And I remember getting an email one day from Scott, and Casey Powell was the CEO of Sequent. He had his own private plane, and Scott says, guess what? Murto Raptor Ridge is the house pour on Casey's airplane. We were ecstatic.
So you mentioned after that kind of great early crop, you had some struggles after that. Was it just keeping enough fruit, or was it quality of fruit, or what were kind of the growing pains?
I think you had a pretty good crop in '92 because of the fruit set. It was perfect warm weather. But then the fruit set started becoming a little bit more 93, 94. 94, I think we bloomed after the 4th of July. And then we did, it was in the rain.
Sure.
So 94, if you have any of those wines, are great wines. You just don't have a lot of them.
Sure.
Yeah.
We opened our last two, well, when Patty Green died, we opened our last 94 Toymore. And we took the last 94 Marsh over to Jim's birthday when he was 92 there this past year. So
Yeah. We're out of 94s. Yeah. And the other part was trying to stay on top of all the work. I mean, not only were we kind of blind and feeling our way, but now we had 8 acres to take care of. And for the three of us with day jobs, it was a lot of really, really hard work.
Sure.
I think fortunately back then, Tory Moore had a crew that was not always busy. So when we needed some work done, we took it off the bill.
Sure. Sure.
So
Sure.
Jose would come over and then they'd do their job.
But it was not long after that, I want to say maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 years, we we did struggle with labor, and we had a crew that came in and really messed up the pruning job. And we were not smart enough initially to understand that. So once we figured that out, we said, we're not going to leave that job to anybody else. So we hired a guy, what was his? Jack Meyer. Jack Meyer, to come out and teach us to prune, which he did. From that point on, Mike and I pruned our whole vineyard, and every year. And we grew the vineyard. There was still room to plant on that additional 20 acres. And so we continued to plant, and we now have 16 acres planted. So the two of us, up until 2 years ago, the two of us have pruned the whole thing every winter ourselves. And I gave up my pruning license 2 years ago, but Mike still has been out there, and you did what, 12 acres yourself this year?
I've got one of the other crews comes in that's 4 to 6 acres. So.
Wow.
Yeah. So we know how to prune.
I can imagine so, yeah. How long did you juggle the keeping a full-time day job and also the vineyard?
11 years ago, I took an early retirement out of paper mill.
Okay. So that was quite a while then.
Yeah.
And I retired, 5 years ago maybe? 6 years, something like that.
Wow.
We still do all the tractor work.
Sure.
We each have our own tractors and our own sprayers, and we do all the spraying and the mowing and all of that.
At what point did you feel like you knew enough to kind of lead the way yourself without a lot of outside help? How long did that take?
5, 6 years. Late 90s, 97, 98. And you've got a pretty good feel of what was going on. Not all of it, but you kind of have milestones or benchmarks in there. And it was like, yeah, maybe on May 15th we should be doing our first spray. Memorial Day is second spray, you know. And if you're going into bloom, let's hope it's around June 21st, and because you always got that 100 to 110 days from bloom, you know, and so you kind of see and feel those days out, and it's kind of nice when you hit them. And
I think the other thing too, though, living on Warden Hill Road, where we are surrounded by wonderful vineyards and wonderful people that own those vineyards, it's a pretty social neighborhood. And so whenever we would have parties, you know, many times one of the topics of discussion is, you know, what's going on in your vineyard. And things have changed over the years. You know, new things crop up that we have to deal with. Different practices we do now than we did in the past. And so having this community of grape growers right at our fingertips has been incredibly helpful as well. Not only are they really dear friends, but they've been a good source. All of us together are a good source for each other. And it's a very sharing community. I remember one harvest was a miserable harvest. It was in the rain, and it was 1997, wasn't it?
pretty close.
Yeah. That horrible harvest when, well, I won't go there. Anyway, but we were loading our load, and the picking crew didn't show up on time, and I literally went out on Warden Hill Road and flagged down any cars that looked like they were workers, and lo and behold, we got people to come and help us harvest. Anyway, it was the end of the day, and Mike was loading, and our tractor broke. The loader wouldn't work. So we called our neighbor down the road, Jerry Koschel from Crumbled Rock Winery, and we said, Jerry, can you come up and help us load? Well, he had just finished harvest. He had taken a shower. He was sitting down with a glass of Pinot, and he puts on his grubbies, drives his tractor up in the rain, and helps us load. Sure. And that's the kind of community it is. Mm-hmm. Anybody would do anything for anybody else. So, you know, it's been hard work, but it's been incredibly rewarding as well.
Did you ever try your hand at making wine or think about winemaking, or was it always just going to be grape growing?
We never got really interested in making wine, but we did dabble in the wine sales part of it.
Oh, okay.
But we would go to in 2002, we first tried our first vintage. Is that Aaron? No,
it was Eric Homaker.
Eric Homaker bought one of our older blocks, and so one of our agreements was, okay, we want to buy back 2 or 3 barrels and try our hand at what everybody else is doing, you know.
Sure. And how did it go?
I think it went really well. It was like that first harvest. Wow, we're sold everything. This is too easy.
It was great. It was great wine.
Yeah.
It was really nice wine. And we didn't have a tasting room. We never had a tasting room. Mm-hmm. And
I think we stayed under 200 or 300 cases. I mean, that was enough.
But that was a lot for us. And let's see, Eric did it with us for
3 or 4 years.
Yep, and then Aaron Hess made our wine for us. And 2014 was our last vintage. What? 2015.
2014 was made at Artisanal, and 2015 was made by Jackson Holsby.
Oh, right.
We did some trading. It was easy it's kind of nice to say, okay, we want a third back in the bottle. No cash, you know, you don't have to pay us for the grape, just third back. And it's easier on their pocketbooks and.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess the other thing that we have enjoyed over the years is getting connected with people that are just getting going in the wine industry. And so Jackson, Alan Holstein's son, when we connected with him, was just getting going in the wine industry. And, you know, we knew we didn't have much money, and that was fine. We got wine back. We were happy, and he was happy. And he's a darn good winemaker. He's made some really lovely wines from our fruit.
Yeah, on that note, what has it been like watching your area of the wine industry grow so fast and see all these new people coming into it, and now you're kind of like in a mentor role? How has that been for you to handle?
Gosh, you know, we've seen filbert orchards on our, you know, all of a sudden last harvest is there and they're gone, and it's a changing scene out there, not just on our road, but I think throughout Yamhill County. I think a lot of ground has been taken out of production in one area and put into grapes, and I hope they all realize the financial things of growing. I mean, it's a farm. It's whether you're raising cows or wheat or grapes, and you've got to manage it like you're going to intend on making a profit. The problem is I see now some of these people don't have they have such a big checkbook. I mean, we may want to add out some of my editorial here on the new people in the industry. Sure. I'm thinking it's great that they're here. There's room for a lot of people. Just look at all the filberts that are getting planted now.
Yeah.
You know, they've taken the old wheat and old grass seed out, and filberts are popping up. So if you go back to 2005, 2006, I think it was up when we saw some of the first big expansions, and then we had that downturn, the recession, and then we came back out of it. And
I guess I would say, for me personally, and I'm just going to address Warden Hill Road, but I am a little saddened by what I see. The people coming in now are pretty much 100% people that don't live on the road anymore. They live someplace else. So, and they hire everything done. You know, they've built these huge, grandiose tasting rooms. We used to pour wine at Crumbled Rock in a little red barn, and we had a heck of a good time, and our customers were wonderful. And that was a lot of fun, and that whole feeling is pretty much gone. The Marsh Little Red Barn is the last standing kind of little tasting room. So I'm saddened because the sense of community is no longer there. You know, the camaraderie that I was talking about earlier, the great neighbors, and you know, it's all gone, and it's changed tremendously. And the new owners are people with, for the most part, a lot of money, and so that community sense is gone. On the other hand, I do totally understand it, because we're all getting old, and all the people on our road are, well, we are about the youngest, and we're old, so they're older. But so, and people's children are not interested in taking on the vineyards, and at some point you can't do it anymore. And so I do totally understand why people are selling these lovely old vineyards. So, you know, I guess inevitably it is going to change, and that's just how life goes.
So let's talk about some of the challenges you've faced growing grapes. I'm thinking specifically of like phylloxera and things like that. How were you affected by that or other similar issues, and how did you deal with it?
Well, that is probably one of our biggest mistakes, is not realizing in the early 90s what a problem flock was going to be. Back then, nobody really talked much about grafted roots or putting stuff on rootstock. Had we had to do it all over again, we would have probably started with 500 plants and, you know, and worked our way up instead of putting 1,000 at a time. You know.
And they would have been grafted
Yeah.
and not self-rooted.
You're right.
So how did you handle it when it hit?
It's just hit. We've discovered it about 5 years ago.
Oh my gosh, okay.
So we are slowly, right around harvest, you can always tell, or right now, you just go out and they're the weak plants and they're not doing much, and out they go, and we've been putting a new one in its place. And
Wow.
it's slow death, but you know, all of a sudden you look back, where's I put it in 5 years, and it's in production now. So whoever, if we sell our place, you know, they're going to have to realize that we've been adding the rootstock back in, and we've got it in several places. That's our biggest challenge.
And it's a big challenge because we are not an irrigated vineyard. So when we put in new plants, we have to hand water them. We hand water them the first year or two, depending on how wet the year has. And it's a very manual process. I mean, we have a 100-gallon tank, and Mike drives the tractor, and I walk behind with a hose.
Oh my gosh.
And we finally got smart. I don't know how smart this will sound, but we went to Ace Hardware and bought 300 1-gallon little red buckets, drilled holes in them, and we sit one next to each plant we have to water, and we walk along and fill up those buckets. I mean, that's how we have to water these new plants.
Wow.
On top of still taking care of the vineyard, you know, staying on top of the spray program and the weeds and all of that kind of stuff. So that has been, I guess, for me personally, it has been a tipping point that says, you know, we're getting too old to be doing this, because we're out there almost every day, and I'm tired of that. You know, we've been there 27 years, and I think it's time to call it a day.
And you heard that we had 8 acres that were planted in '78, so that's our old, and those vines are still, we've got a couple bullseyes in the middle of both 4-acre sections, but for the most part, you know, they're still kicking out great fruit, and Winderley and Belpont swear by it, so we're happy we're glad to see that they're still hanging on, and you know, they still have got great fruit sets on them. So
Sure.
We'll see how this harvest goes.
And both of those wineries make single vineyard designates, and their wines are lovely. Belpont particularly has been our customer since 1994, 94, and he has made a Murto Vineyard Pinot always since then. He is a really good winemaker, and he's got that vineyard dialed in really well. So he knows the vineyard, and he knows how to make wine from that fruit.
So what sets your vineyard apart? What are the special characteristics of your grapes?
The red fruit, the cherry, raspberry, nut. And of course, everybody talks about the Dundee Hills nose, so.
And the peppery finish on the back end. It's got a bit of a pepper on the back end. It's interesting, though. We sell the wineries that we sell to, 4 of them, Granville, which is Jackson Holstein, White Rose, Winderley, and Belpont, all make a single vineyard designate from our vineyard. And their wines are different. They're all really good. And there are some underlying characteristics that are the same, but there is a difference in all of them. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, it's winemaking styles, barrels, yeasts. I think several of them are natural yeasts.
And whole cluster at White
Whole
Rose.
cluster seems to be a big thing now. So
Yeah.
that keeps you on top. When they tell you they want to do it, that keeps you on top of your spray program, because you certainly don't want botrytis in the middle of whole cluster.
Sure,
So
sure.
it's knowing when to put that botrytis spray on before bunch closing.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about some of the changes you've seen, at least in your kind of the local, very local wine industry. I'm curious, as you've seen the industry grow so much, what are the changes besides just size? What are some of the other changes you've seen? You mentioned kind of a loss of community. What are some of the other changes you've seen, for positive or negative?
Well, I guess I would say on the plus side, these big guys that are coming in have done a great job of helping to put Oregon wines on the map. And I'm not sure, had it stayed little mom and pops like it was in the beginning, if that would have happened. I mean, our Pinots are wonderful and they have gained worldwide recognition, but these big guys are marketing machines, and their distribution is so much bigger than anything that I think in the beginning anybody would have figured out. So I think that's a positive for the bigger ones coming in.
We've seen great innovations in equipment.
Oh yeah.
Sprayers and tillers and tractors. And when we first started, we had a two-wheel drive tractor on hillside. Believe me, that's the last thing you want to see on a muddy day is trying to get a two-wheel drive tractor up that hillside.
Sure.
With a 100-gallon sprayer on there and you're bouncing around. So I'm glad to see all this in new sprayers and weeding machines, and now we've gotten into where the mechanical harvesting is starting to be. We haven't seen it, but we hear about it, and I think you're going to see innovation keep going, whether they pick it up through the raspberry pickers or the boysenberry pickers and into making better grape picking machines.
I think also with the bigger guys, there's probably been more research done into, what works well in a vineyard, and things have absolutely changed in the 6 years that we've been at it. And as I said before, we do things differently now than we did when we first started. And I think that's probably going to continue.
I like some of the research coming out of Oregon State.
I was going to ask about that.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead.
In the egg USDA over there, I'm always interested in what they're saying about Dr. Skinkus. I always read her column because the money they put into her studies, and it's helpful. You sit there and see the till, no-till, the crop loads, just various things that they come up with in studies. Some are helpful to the grower, and I hope that more growers look at it, because if you can find out that you don't need to make a pass through there doing another tilling, well, you've just saved yourself gallons of diesel and your time, and where you could be doing something more profitable for your company, your farm.
Sure. One thing we found as we talked to particularly grape growers is the wide variety of opinions on the right way to do things and the wrong way to do things.
Yep.
I'm curious how you've sorted through all those opinions and all of the data and all of the research and innovations and sort of chosen your path.
It's what worked.
Yeah, we haven't varied very much from what we did starting. Of course, we bought new sprayers. We've kept up there, newer tractors. try to your powdery mildew sprays are probably your most important things to get started with, and what works and what doesn't work, and the like OVS and the other chemical companies keeping you informed of, okay, this stuff is not working anymore. Maybe it's time to switch to this. Or,
There's a lot to stay on top of because there's a lot of changes that happen every year, I think, in the industry. And I think if we can figure out something like, we used to till every other row, to clean cultivate every other row. And then we heard Patty Skinkus talk about, didn't really make that much difference. And so we said, if it doesn't make that much difference, then why are we spending the time doing this? And so we don't do that anymore. And so when there are things that make less passes through the vineyard, that's a good thing. If there are, we're big on, we spray seaweed and humic and things, try to find natural kind of things that we can spray to give nutrients to the plants. And I know when we first started, nobody talked about nutrients to the plants. That wasn't, nobody thought about it. Our vineyard looks a little weedy, and we have a lot of bugs out there, and that's not a bad thing. We have a lot of ladybugs and a lot of bees, and so I guess try to let Mother Nature do as much as Mother Nature can.
And when we found phylloxera, that was just another sign to say, quit tilling. Why are you moving this dirt all throughout the vineyard? Also, when you have workers in there, if the ground's compact with old grass or new grass on it, that means that mud on their feet is not traveling 10 yards down or 200 yards down. So kind of try to mitigate the movement of dirt now with phylloxera.
Makes sense. So you mentioned earlier that you have given up your pruning and you're kind of pulling back. So what's the future for Murto? Do you have a plan for what comes next?
I do.
I think we're going to be retiring and selling. We've talked it over with our buyers, and they're well aware of that the vineyard may be sold tomorrow, next week, next year.
Sure.
With our grape buyers.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, our
We
customers.
will be 72 this fall, and we're not getting any younger.
What do you plan to do after you retire?
Maybe we will travel around and go to some wine tastings.
Go taste somebody else's wine.
What do you see happening in the future for Oregon wine? What do you see the next, say, 10 years in the Oregon wine industry looking like?
I think there's always going to be a market for the person and the winemaker who wants the hand. Some ground like ours is not going to be machine picked. If you get to the point on our ground, it's a lot of, there we have about a third of it's terraced. You're not going to put a grape picker on there. Some of it you could, but it would require a whole new trellis system. I think there's always going to be a market for the hand-picked premium grapes, and I think the Dundee Hills have pretty much proved that that's where it's going to be at.
Yeah.
I hope that's right. And whoever gets the vineyard next, they're going to get to to find out.
Sure.
I guess one thing I would say is I believe the Dundee Hills will become even probably more, I don't want to say famous, but more in demand than it has been in the past, because I think the Dundee Hills has gained such a great reputation, and now there are a couple of really big premium wineries that have purchased ground there. They're going to promote that even more, I think. I think the days of the little mom and pops like us are numbered. And it's going to be, the buyers will be big places with wheelbarrows full of money, because the young winemakers, who personally, that's who I would love to sell to, is a young person just getting off the ground. They don't have the money and can't afford it. And that's kind of sad as well, because we have had conversations with a couple of them that have gotten fruit from our vineyard or worked in wineries that our vineyard fruit goes to, and they've been very complimentary about the fruit, and they would love to own that vineyard, but there's no way that they can afford it. And so they've basically been priced out of the Dundee Hills, at least. And I think that's probably true in Yamhill County. Maybe true throughout the state. I just don't know what property's selling for in Roseburg or Medford or Grants Pass or something like that.
Do you see more growth coming? Do you see, we're at 730 or whatever wineries now and over 1,000 vineyards. Do you see that continuing to grow at the rate it's been growing?
I don't know how much more ground they can put it. I guess you can start taking the valley floor, and they do it in California, so that would be, I think growth has got to come. The hillsides are pretty much planted, anything south facing in our area.
Well, and now in our area, they have gone over our hill and are planting north-facing vineyards. And I guess it remains to be seen, how successful that they are. But there are some really big vineyards that people have put a lot of money into the north side, over just on the other side of us.
Interesting. What advice would you give someone who wanted to enter the industry today? And that can be in any role in the industry. What advice would you have?
Be ready to work your butt off for not a lot of money. 50 cents an hour about is what we...
Oh, I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah, I think it is.
If you can find a piece of ground, 5 acres, start small, learn it. Don't be afraid to get your fingers dirty.
You're not going to make any money if you hire all of your work to be done. You've got to work it yourself, and for a couple of reasons. One, the cash flow won't be there to if you have to hire it. It's going to be your favorite charity, like ours was for a long time. And the other thing is, if you don't work it, you don't understand, you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You have to understand and know what needs to be done in your site. When we spray, and it's, I complain all the time when I have to get on the tractor for 6 hours and spray the dang thing, but you get to look at every vine and you know how everything's doing, and that's really important. You've got to stay connected to your ground. And the people that don't live here and don't get into their vineyards have lost that connection with the land, I think.
So that's all the questions I have planned for you. Is there anything else I should have asked? Anything else you'd like to mention here at the end?
I guess I would just like to close with one thing, and I would just say that the Oregon wine industry is just filled with lovely people, and this makes me emotional. A lot of them are gone, and I think a lot of them are our friends, and I just hope that the new people, the next generation, can develop that kind of a community like we did. Okay, you got that. Okay, I'm done.
No, I understand. Well, thank you both so much. We really do appreciate your time and your thoughts. And we'll go ahead and stop there.